The Spanish Soldier by Ricardo Segreda. "Don't talk to him, he's weird." 15-year-old Paco was hollering across the cafeteria at the new student standing next to Kevin at the lunch counter. Prompted by boredom, the new boy had just asked Kevin, "Are the lunches here any good?" Kevin, lonely and eager to make a friend, was about to say that the macaroni was better than the pizza. However, Paco, who was watching both teenagers from his corner table, wasn't going to have any of this. As far as he was concerned, nobody was going to like Kevin. And his call worked. Upon hearing Paco, the student turned his back on Kevin. Blood rushed to Kevin's face as he thought about the vest he was wearing, with its elegantly embroidered images of Ava Gardner and Marilyn Monroe. Did it make it too obvious to everyone that he was gay? Paco, who was seated with his buddies, all wearing their Liga de Quito soccer jerseys in honor of Ecuador's upcoming match against Uruguay, continued loudly so everybody in the lunchroom would hear him. "Steer clear of that weirdo," he yelled, "unless you want everyone to think you're as weird as he is." Other students, including a few girls, laughed. Kevin looked down at the floor while pretending not to hear them. He paid for his noodles and quietly sat at an isolated table in the corner of the cafeteria, far from the others, though he'd try to sneak glances at Enrique, the star player on the school soccer team. He was tall and muscular, looked a lot like the movie star Taylor Lautner, and Kevin was in love with him, even though he knew he could never have him. For the rest of the school day, class after class, Kevin sat at the back of every room, avoiding eye contact and not speaking unless called on by an instructor. Unfortunately, since Kevin often let his mind wander in daydreams, his answers were usually off when he was called upon and occasionally embarrassing, such as when he confused Budapest with Buddhism, provoking chuckles from his classmates. Kevin hated all of this. He couldn't wait to return home and be with his grandmother Nona in the small town of Tumbaco. As far as Kevin knew, she was the only person in the world who not only loved him, but liked him. Indeed, with his short stature, dark brown skin, and indigenous features, especially his aquiline nose, he had a hard time even liking himself, wishing he could look like tall and lighter-skinned Enrique. Nona had raised him since the age of 3, after his mother's death at the hands of her new boyfriend, who strangled her in a spasm of drunken rage. And Nona was not only his caregiver, but also skilled seamstress, who taught him the craft. Thus, he was considering a career designing costumes for musical variety shows on television, his favorite sort of program, which his grandmother actively supported. However, though he hated going to Santa Maria Secondary School, Nona insisted he remain until he graduated. The day following his humiliation during lunch hour, Kevin turned 16. Everybody knew because birthdays for both teachers and students were announced on the school's homepage. Nobody approached Kevin to wish him well, but he didn't care. He didn't believe anybody would really mean it. Yet shortly after the final bell of the day sounded as Kevin got up to leave, Paco, the boy who had taunted him the day before, called his name. "Hey, Kevin." Kevin recognized Paco's voice and kept walking. "Hey, Kevin, stop." Kevin turned around. "I read that you're turning 16 today. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for yesterday, and I want to make it up to you." "Make it up?" "Listen, I can be an asshole at times, but not all the time. We can get along." "Seriously?" "Yes, really. Hey, come down with me to the school basement. We're celebrating my brother's birthday, but we'll include you as well." Though Kevin was suspicious of Paco, in that moment the possibility that he might finally be accepted overrode his misgiving, and he smiled. "Thank you." Placing his hand on Kevin's shoulder, Paco guided him down a flight of stairs. The absence of music struck Kevin as curious. Maybe it's a surprise party? Especially since the lights were off. As he entered into the dark space, hard knuckles jammed into his jaw. "Happy birthday, faggot!" Before Kevin could turn and run, he was shoved onto the cold, wet floor. 3 boys began to kick him from all sides, landing blows to his arms, his thighs, his back, and his rear end, all the while singing the happy birthday song. During the last chorus, "To you," they heard a door open. "The janitor!" one of them yelled. They sprinted through an exit that led to the school's garage, leaving Kevin in a fetal position, pain surfacing across his back, his butt, his ribs, his arms, his legs. It all hurt so much he couldn't move. He tried to scream, but could only groan weakly. The janitor's feet appeared before his face. "What the hell is this?" The janitor, a short, stocky man of 60, yelled. "Get off my damn floor and get out of here now, or I'll call security." "I got beat up," Kevin murmured. "Get out!" Kevin sucked in as much of the basement's humid, moldy air as he could and pushed himself up. He then limped toward the stairs, a sharp pain in his left side with each breath. The final school bus left, so after he called Nona to let her know that he would be late, he limped 2 blocks to where he could take municipal transport home. He wanted to cry, but held back until he got off the bus so nobody would see. The hot, salty tears would finally run down his cheeks in the 10-minute stumble from the bus stop to where he'd seen Nona at her window with her sewing machine. "I made something special for you," Nona called out from her workroom as he came in through the kitchen. On the table, a birthday cake, dark chocolate, a 1 6 candle on the edge, and "I love you" in white lettering. Now a new wave of grief surfaced from within. He knew Nona was expecting him to help himself to a piece while yelling out, "Thank you, Nona," to his affectionate caretaker, but his physical and emotional pain left him beyond any appetite, as well as beyond the capacity to even fake enthusiasm for her sake. Not saying anything, he went straight to his room, falling onto his bed, face down on his pillow. He didn't want Nona to know anything. He felt that she had enough to deal with, at the sewing machine all day and often all night, caring for him and other grandchildren whom she supported. He didn't need to add to her busy life. In addition, he felt like telling anyone about what happened would be like reliving it. Eventually, he put on his headphones and immersed himself in a download of greatest hits by his favorite singer, the Mexican legend Lola Beltran. Loneliness, betrayal, longing, and hurt were her specialties. Kevin put the songs on repeat, brushed his teeth, and listened to the impassioned ache in Lola's voice, thinking of his own longing for Enrique and the handsome actors on the telenovelas. Then he meditated on the diva posters that adorned his room: Marilyn Monroe, Ava Gardner, Rita Hayworth, Maria Montez, Dolores Del Rio, until sleep overtook him. The alarm on his phone rang at 6 a.m., as it always did, but Kevin could barely move his limbs, though he had to. After he emptied his bladder and bowels, he stumbled back toward his bed. "You're going to be late, my love," Nona said sternly, but without any anger. "Nona, I can't move." "What's going on?" "I think I have a flu," said Kevin, lying. "Please let me stay home, just for today. Maybe tomorrow, too." This time he couldn't control himself. The tears spread across his face onto his pillow. Nona promptly put her palm across his forehead before turning towards the cabinet over the toilet. Kevin wanted to scream, "There's no need," but his state overwhelmed him. He could only cry. Nona placed the thermometer in Kevin's mouth, and while she waited, she mentioned that she had to work on a large order of shirts and would be out of the house for the morning because she needed to purchase more buttons. The thermometer read 37 degrees centigrade. Normal. Still, Kevin's pain was all too apparent. "I'm going to call Dr. Sanchez." "Nona, don't. Please just let me rest. Please. Just one day." Needing to get back to work, with orders due, Nona relented. "Let me get you some aspirin, and I will mix the orange juice with ginger and honey and heat it in the microwave. It's best to drink it hot. And I'll bring some oatmeal with yogurt," said Nona as she went to the kitchen. For the next 2 days, Kevin found he could move from his bedroom to his bathroom with less strain, but he was still not ready to go back to school. Finally, by Sunday, he felt better, and Nona offered to take him to Quito to see a new Despayan Incan artist, Mikos Cuno. Cuno was a member of the Incan elite who had converted to Catholicism in the 16th century and became Rodrigo de Vega, a painter in the service of his new faith. His artwork, long thought lost, had recently been discovered in a vault in Madrid and returned to Ecuador. The recurring subject of the Cuno Vega work involved the Spanish conquest of the Incan Empire. His imagery was detailed and realistic, almost photographic, and often highlighting scars and bruises on the naked bodies of Incan warriors. A figure in one large work in particular gave Kevin pause. It featured the conquistador Francisco de Orellana, emerging from the jungle with a regiment of Spanish soldiers. Orellana was proud, confident, invincible, yet the soldiers behind him looked fatigued, shoulders drooped, and pale, hollow faces. One soldier in particular haunted Kevin. He appeared to be about Kevin's age, with a sorrow in his eyes that to Kevin made him beautiful. After they left the exhibit, Kevin couldn't stop thinking about the sad soldier in the painting. Later, he and his grandmother had lunch at the Plaza San Francisco in Quito's historic center. He gasped as he spotted a person on the other side of the square, and it was him, that Spanish soldier, who now resembled a modern-day tourist in blue jeans, with a native boy at his feet shining his boots. At least, Kevin thought he was seeing the same young man. He wondered if he should take out his phone and snap a picture. As Kevin reached into his pocket, though, he heard a young woman's voice. "Are you ready to order?" Awkwardly, turning to look at the waitress, Kevin mumbled, yes, I would like—" When he turned his head back to look across the plaza, the soldier was gone. "Would you like some more time?" "We'll both have the chicken special," said Nona, hungry and impatient. On Monday morning, Kevin boarded the bus to school, reluctant to go back to class because he knew what lay ahead for him that day. It would be difficult, but he didn't know what else to do. Paco and his friends, smiles on their faces, confronted Kevin as he walked through Santa Maria's main entrance. "We missed you, Kevin." Paco's friends laughed. "Were you on vacation?" "Get lost," said Kevin in a nervous but assertive voice. Paco took 2 steps forward into Kevin's face. "And if I don't?" "Get away." "Come on. Make me get lost." "No." Kevin had only thrown a punch once in his 16 years, at a male cousin when they were both 5. He generally opted to suffer blows when others hit him, since he feared whatever beating he was taking would be worse if he hit back. Yet now, from his gut, a red-hot rage arose, from his stomach, through his spinal column and heart, to his arms, then, finally, through his now tightly clenched right fist. Kevin's knuckles not only met Paco's mouth with a force that not even Kevin expected, but it also knocked the bully flat onto his back, with Paco's head slamming against the speckled gray tiles of the school corridor with a loud, wet crack. What just happened? It was as if not only the bully, but everybody, Paco's friends, onlookers, had just been punched in the head as well. Seconds passed before a girl came forward and asked Paco if he was all right. A male teacher, who overheard the commotion from his classroom, saw Paco on the floor and helped him up. Paco's friends now looked at Kevin with a fear they never knew before. And there he was, the Spanish soldier once again at the far end of the corridor, in gym shoes, books under his arm, talking on his phone. Kevin wanted to run to him, but the bell for the first class rang and everybody, including the soldier, dispersed. Though Kevin didn't earn any friends after that morning, his enemies kept their distance. And there was not one day without the Spanish soldier appearing in his world, albeit always far away and fleetingly. It left Kevin feeling disoriented and made it hard for him to even think about his favorite subjects, music and fashion. Thoughts of the soldier kept intruding. Kevin was in the jungle, naked except for a loincloth and running as arrows shot past him. Behind him were men, many men, shouting, "Traitor! Kill the traitor!" An arrow, then another, punctured his upper back, the tip piercing his lung. Before him, as blood ran down his back, appeared a river that he knew had piranhas, but he was going to take a chance. It was morning. Kevin was on the carpet of his bedroom, naked and covered in cold sweat. He was not in the jungle. There were no arrows. There were no piranha. He was dreaming. "Kevin, my love, your breakfast is getting cold," Nona called from the kitchen. He didn't have time to shower. Kevin hurriedly washed his hair in the bathroom sink, then used the same towel to dry his head to wipe the moisture off his body. He quickly dressed and ran down the stairs to the kitchen. "Damn it, I'm sorry, Nona, I overslept. I can't eat because I'm going to be late for the bus." "My love, it's Saturday." "It is? You must have too many things on your mind." He did, of course, but there was no way he was going to let Nona know. As it was indeed Saturday, Kevin decided to take the bus to Quito to visit the Metropolitan Museum. and study that painting again. The soldier was more beautiful than ever, and yes, it was the Spanish soldier that he kept seeing. But why? Kevin wondered if he was losing his mind. Kevin never took religion or spirituality all that seriously. Nona was a devout Catholic and obliged him to attend Mass, but he never felt the same connection to God that the other parishioners felt. For one thing, the religion, with all of its imagery of torture and suffering, disturbed him. In fact, the huge mural inside the 16th century La Compañía de Jesus Church in Quito's Historical Center, with its detailed depictions of the cruel punishments, tongues impaled, skin flayed, that awaited sinners, made Kevin cry so much when Nona took him to a service there on Easter when he was 7 that she promised never to bring him back. Yet now, he felt he had to explore possible reasons for these strange sightings. With his telephone, he began to search for indigenous shamans in his area. The challenge was to find one who might be even halfway credible, but finally he saw one right in Tumbaco, who would be hosting an ayahuasca ceremony the next weekend. Telling Nona he would be spending the night with a friend, Kevin brought the warmest wool sweater Nona had ever made for him, along with 2 liters of water for what he knew would be a long, cold night from midnight to morning. There were about 20 people who gathered for the event, mostly young men and women from the area, but also travelers from Argentina, Germany, and the United States. Kevin was the youngest one there and technically underage for the ritual, but he lied and claimed to be 19. The shaman, wearing a striped poncho and headdress made of brightly dyed feathers, began with a brief history of the ceremony, along with a warning that it did not come without risks. As night fell and the air chilled, everyone stood together before a bonfire as the shaman's assistant approached each participant with a small cup of the ayahuasca brew to sip. It was the most bitter beverage Kevin had ever tasted, and his immediate reflexive response was to spit it out. A wave of acute nausea overcame him as soon as the ayahuasca settled into his stomach, but he resisted vomiting as long as he could. Soon, what he saw before him, the other participants, the bonfire, the shaman, the buildings outside the park in the distance, began to dissolve into pixels. Kevin was naked, except for a loincloth, and carrying a large clay pot of water to a man covered in tattoos from his bald head down to his shins. "Leave the water at my feet, Taruka," he said. "Leave and do not return until the sun sets." Kevin understood that he was also Taruka. The ayahuasca dream had transported him to what felt like a memory of 16th century Ecuador, where he was an orphaned water carrier for the high priest Ayar of the Incan kingdom. Instinctively, he knew that his life, apart from bringing water to Ayar twice a day, involved picking ripe fruit off trees and bushes for members of the Incan elite. It was on one of his daily visits to the river that he came upon a young man of the sort he'd never seen before in all his 16 years. The stranger, who appeared to be the same age as Taruka, was wearing an unusual and excessive amount of cloth, and his feet were covered with the tanned hide of an animal, perhaps a bear. He was very pale, too, with a thick growth of hair over his lip and on his chin. Suddenly Taruka realized something and trembled. This was one of those white-skinned invaders from far away who had come to conquer his land and enslave his people. Taruka had learned that they had no mercy, that they were more sinister than any snake and more savage than the fiercest jaguar. If he crossed paths with them, he was told they were to be fought and killed. And for Taruka, here was a painless opportunity, since the stranger already appeared to be dying. Indeed, Taruka now saw that he had been wounded, bleeding from his side. For a brief moment, Taruka was thrilled. He saw himself returning to the priests as well as the elite, carrying the head of this invader, as crowds cheered. With that, Taruka would not only be proclaimed a hero, but elevated in rank and, best of all, regarded as a candidate for the priesthood. The latter had been his dream as far back as his earliest memory, as a witness to Inti Raymi, the sacred festival honoring the sun god Apu Punchau. The spectacle of colorful clothing, music, exuberant dancing, and the celebration of the community left an impression on Taruka that defined a life purpose for him. He looked around for a heavy rock that he could smash against the invader's head. As he was standing, surveying the land, the soldier extended his hand and placed it on Taruka's foot. Taruka jumped, then looked at the soldier, panic in his eyes. Yet the soldier said softly, "Piedad, ten piedad." Taruka fell to his knees and looked at the soldier's face, close up and into his eyes. "No quiero morir, no, Aurora." Taruka did not know what he was saying, but the deeper he looked into the soldier's eyes, the more pity he felt, even tenderness. The soldier reached out to hold Taruka's left hand. Knowing what he was doing was completely irrational, in defiance of his culture, his people, and his nation, Taruka dipped his container into the river and then brought water to the soldier's cracked, dry lips. As he was drinking, Taruka placed the palm of one hand on the soldier's forehead and the other on the soldier's chest. With the sacred language of his people, he invoked a prayer to the god Viracocha for mercy on this foreigner. He recalled that a very old priest once told Taruka that he was blessed with a gift, one that jealous priests covet. A spirit revived in the fallen young man, he breathed more easily and was no longer as pale, as color flushed his cheeks. Since he struggled to sit up, Taruka carried him to a nearby cave where he could hide. He later went back to the woods to bring the soldier berries and papaya. Later that evening, Taruka returned to Ayar, bearing water, and for the first time in his life, he felt very conflicted. What was the purpose of life? Why did he, Taruka, exist? Taruka had never pondered these questions before, nor had he ever felt as deeply about another human being, not even the kind old woman who raised him when his parents died, as he did towards that beautiful young stranger in the cave. Taruka returned to him the following day, bearing water, fruit, and smoked fish. The soldier was still there, now able to sit up, and bestowed upon Taruka an expression of deep gratitude for what he was doing. Taruka silently watched while he ate and drank, then reached for his hand. The soldier reciprocated the gesture, and they looked into each other's eyes for a few moments before both leaned forward to kiss. A kiss which to Taruka opened him to a bliss he had never experienced before. The Spanish soldier, still weak from his injuries, promptly fell back, saying, "Gracias, gracias." Though it felt like it was killing him to leave the soldier, Taruka knew that he could not linger any longer or stay here indefinitely, and returned with reluctance to his duties. The next morning, after fulfilling his tasks, he ventured into the woods to bring food for the soldier. All the while he felt that life had never been more beautiful. The leaves on trees were never greener, the sky was never bluer, the chirping of birds never more melodic, and soon he and this soldier would be in each other's arms. Yet when he entered the cave, it was empty. He was crushed. He felt the soldier had exploited him. He clearly had no more use for Taruka, or maybe, Taruka thought, the soldier had duties, just like Taruka did, to his people that were greater than anything he wanted or needed in his life. He then wondered why all the members of all tribes and all nations couldn't be one large family, living in peace and harmony. With a heavy heart, he stepped out of the cave and was immediately confronted by a squadron of Incan soldiers armed with spears and arrows. One reached into a canvas sack and held up the head of the Spanish soldier by his hair, his beautiful brown eyes now dulled, and tossed it at Taruka's feet. "Do you believe," the leader of the squadron said, "that you have freedom? That you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and with no consequence?" Taruka stood still, not wanting to take in what was going on. "Your master, Priest Ayar, saw everything. Though he was at the temple, he saw you kiss the invader, that conqueror. He saw you betray us, your tribe, your community. What are your final words, traitor?" Taruka took a deep breath and a step back before he turned and ran, with no idea of where to go and also knowing it was futile, but he ran nonetheless. They pursued him with a rain of spears and arrows. Taruka proved to be much faster than either they or he himself realized, but at the edge of the Parana River it was over. As the tips began to pierce the skin of his back, touching bones, he plunged into the deep, warm water. The sun was rising, and final embers of the bonfire were slowly dying. Strong arms and firm hands lifted Kevin off the ground. He stood with his fellows, the other participants from the ceremony, including one whom he had not seen before, the Spanish soldier, wearing a jacket, jeans, and a wool cap. He was smiling at Kevin, and just as Kevin was about to speak, the Spaniard put his index finger to his lips. "Shush," the gesture said. He then took Kevin aside and spoke to him in a soft voice. "My name is Reynaldo Lopez Santiago. Like you, I was orphaned. I was 16 when I was recruited to serve the Spanish crown, the youngest in my company. Our crossing paths, our love, and our deaths were preordained, Taruka, just as it is preordained that we would reunite. I live in you, eternally, as your spirit guide in this life, for your journey now is that of a healer." "Hey, Kevin," one young woman hollered, "come here, the shaman wants you." With that, Kevin turned his head and saw the young woman waving her hand and standing next to the shaman. When he turned his head back, Reynaldo was gone. Kevin walked over to the shaman, who told him to remove his sweater and shirt, stand straight, extend his hands palm up, before striking him with branches, after which the shaman filled his mouth with a strongly alcoholic corn-based brew called chicha, which he spat at Kevin's chest. Despite what he went through at the ceremony, when Kevin returned home the next morning, life was seemingly normal. There was Nona at her sewing machine, with piles of shirts, pants, and dresses behind her. The rooster next door was crowing. The dogs on the street were barking. The occasional motorcycle ripped through the neighborhood, leaving a trail of dust. Kevin wondered if everything he experienced over the weekend, the return to a former life, the vision of Reynaldo, was merely hallucinations provoked by what was, after all, a hallucination. That is, until one late afternoon 2 days later, when he was walking through a park at sunset, and he saw a crowd of teenagers, some weeping, standing over somebody. Kevin pushed his way through them. It was Paco, the bully, unconscious, blood leaking from his side. A young woman was holding his wrist. "What happened?" Kevin asked. He was talking to this girl, she said, and he didn't know that her boyfriend was with one of the gangs. They shot him. Where is the ambulance? He doesn't have a pulse. He's not breathing." For a fleeting moment, Kevin felt the urge to keep on walking. But he paused and saw at distance an older man who resembled AR, with his same cold, vengeful stare. And Kevin decided he himself was not going to be another AR. He knelt before Paco, put his hand over Paco's chest, and saw Reynaldo, there behind the others. Kevin, now Taruka, placed his other hand on Paco's forehead. As the sirens of the approaching ambulance and police cars got louder, Paco's chest began to expand and contract. He opened his eyes and saw Kevin. "You're going to be fine," Kevin said, as he let the medics take over. Kevin looked up at Reynaldo, standing at a slight distance behind the crowd, who then smiled at Kevin and disappeared.